if you're keeping track of climate change and you're wondering what metrics you might invoke for that, the amount of snowfall you got last winter or this winter is not as relevant as you think. Here's why. If it snows at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, the size of the snow crystals is relatively small. All right? All right, it froze quickly up there, and it fell out just as a little bit of ice. All right, the quote, warmer it gets towards 32 degrees, the bigger the snowflakes come. So warmer winters accumulate deeper snowfalls. Are you one of these who only chooses to wear a seatbelt when you're driving fast on the freeway? Like if you're going below 30 miles an hour, no, that's not fast enough, I don't need it. Excuse me? You know Usain Bolt, the world record holder in the 100-meter dash? Do you know what his top speed is? About 25 miles an hour. Here's what you do. Go up to him and say, I'm going to put a brick wall at the end of your 100 meters. Don't slow down. Just keep running face first and tell me what happens. He'll look at you like, what are you, an idiot? What? Okay, that's exactly what will happen to you. If you're in a car, not wearing a seatbelt, going 25 miles an hour, and the car goes headfirst into a brick wall, you keep going. The car stops, but you don't. You keep going, and your face breaks the windshield. December 25th, 2020. Merry Christmas to all the Christians in the world and those who celebrate this day who might not be Christian. It's also the birthday of Isaac Newton. Oh yeah, Isaac Newton, born 1642, December 25th. Well, that's what his mother will tell you. But in England, they were not keen on anything the Pope told them to do, and by then the Pope said, all of Christendom shall go onto the Gregorian calendar. And that Gregorian calendar was an adjustment to the Julian calendar, which added 10 days. So what's 10 days after December 25th, we get to January 4th. And so Isaac Newton on the Gregorian calendar was born January 4th, 1643. So that's more than you ever care to know about Isaac Newton and the Gregorian calendars. But there it is. You know, if aliens landed on Earth and they said, take me to your leader, I wonder how many of us would find some leader to take them to. I wouldn't. I wouldn't take them to any leader at all. You know what I'd do? I'd bring them to Comic-Con. That's what I'd do. Then they just blend in. And then they could see that we pretend that we are they sometimes. And I'd wonder if in their Comic-Con, do they dress up as humans? Just a question. I'm here on the evening of July 12th, shortly after sunset, waiting for comet Neowise to emerge out of the dusky twilight skies. Hasn't happened yet, but when it does, I'll be ready for it. You ever wonder why ice floats? Here you have this substance, water, and you make it colder, and somehow it becomes less dense and floats. Most things, when you cool it down, they shrink. Okay? That seems to be the natural order of things in this world, except for water. So, it is, in fact, the case that as water freezes, it expands by about 10%. So, every ice cube has about 10% of its volume sitting above the surface of the water. Where have we heard that before? Ah, yes. Icebergs are ice, frozen water, floating in the ocean. They have only about 10% of their volume sitting above. So if you're on a ship, say the Titanic, and there's a little bitty chunk of ice out there, it is much larger below. Watch out, steer around it. So while I'm waiting for comet Neowise to emerge, I'll just say a couple of things about comets. As they come from the outer solar system and plunge down towards the sun, heat from the sun will evaporate the ice that they're made of, and it'll grow a tail. Now that's what it looks like on its way in, but on its way out, the pressure from the sunlight will still make a tail, but now the tail is ahead of the comet instead of behind it. So the comet goes in head first and goes out tail first. Not only that, just days ago, the comet was on the other side of the sun in its orbit in the solar system. And if it's on the other side of the sun, you'd have to wake up before sunrise to see it. But now that it has moved and whipped around to the other side of the sun, it is now trailing the sun in the sky, which means you got to come out at sunset to see it then. If someone asks you the date of Easter, you got to look that one up. Christmas, December 25th. American Independence Day, July 4th. They're dates we got. Easter, I got to look that one up. You know why? Because of the way it's defined. It's linked to the moon and the equinox. I don't know if you knew this. Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring, the March equinox. That's when Easter is, every year. Why? Well, when Pope Gregory sort of put that into place, what had been happening is we didn't get the calendar quite right over here in the West in Christendom. And Easter was migrating and was almost about to appear on the same day as Passover. And the Catholic Church said, we can't have that. So they set it up relative to the moon so that it will never overlap with Passover. Part 2 of the question, where do I get all the ties? Some of them are handmade, so they're unique, hand-painted. So that makes them unique. And I know someone who hasn't made one for me in a while. She used to paint them in her basement, so I got to find her again, see if she's going to kick it back in. But also I have vests. Several of my vests are custom vests, custom designed with a pattern specifically cut for me. So that means you can't have it. But Etsy has a nice selection of astronomical ties. I don't know that they're silk, some are polyester, but who cares if it's a novelty tie. So Etsy's got a good selection. One of my neckties, it's captured the illustrations of Leonardo da Vinci, all right? An unimpeachably brilliant person in the history of our species. I want to call your attention to a very familiar illustration. It's right there. This is sometimes called the Vitruvian Man. Leonardo drew this. It's a human being, a man in the middle of a circle, and arms, go up and down, and the legs do two different positions. The assumption was we could fit perfectly into a circle. A circle is perfect math. Humans are the divine creation of an all-powerful God, and so there must be some connection there. So it's assumed that your belly button could be the exact middle of the circle, and your arms and legs would stretch, and no, people are all different shapes. The belly button isn't always in the middle, and arms are not always the same as your legs. Don't most things in this world, you have a love-hate relationship with it? It's kind of true when you think about it. Maybe it's because you cannot know love without knowing hate. And because they give meaning to each other, as though they're two sides of the same coin. You can't have a coin with only one side. I mean, think about that. There's always, you flip it over, there's the other side, giving context to what you were just looking at when you flipped it over. So with science in particular, yes, science does great things. It enables this communique right here, right now. All right, science, it shapes modern civilization. But to harness it requires wisdom. If you don't have that wisdom, you will learn to hate the science that, in fact, perhaps we should all be loving. You got to love Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night. Okay? I have several ties that are different aspects of The Starry Night. But as I mentioned in another TikTok, we know what time of night is the image that he used for his painting. And it was about 4:30 in the morning. That's the only way you can have the crescent moon off on one side and Venus brilliant in the middle. Well, if it's 4:30 in the morning, I don't think of that painting as Van Gogh's Starry Night. Instead, because I tend to be an optimist, a realistic optimist, I'd like thinking that tomorrow will be brighter than today at all times. I think of it not as Van Gogh's Starry Night. Since it was done at 4:30 in the morning, I think of it as Van Gogh's Starry Dawn. Quasars, quasi-stellar radio sources. You know why we call them quasi-stellar? Because in a telescope, they're full of galaxies, but they're so far away that the energy-generating region shows up as a point of light like stars do in our own galaxy. But we knew they weren't stars. So they were quasi-stellar. quasi-stellar, and they were sources of radio waves, quasi-stellar radio sources. Until we discovered that most quasars actually don't give off radio waves. So they give off other kinds of light. So we can't brand them all with a radio wave acronym. So they came to be known as QSOs, quasi-stellar objects. So there you have it. A little bit of cosmic nomenclature. If you want to launch something in orbit around the Earth, it'll probably land in one of three sort of orbital categories. The lowest is low Earth orbit. It takes about 90 minutes to complete. It's not very high up, a couple hundred miles, 300 kilometers. And at that altitude, you're above most of the atmosphere, so you can sustain an orbit without it decaying from atmospheric resistance. All right, go higher up, you're in middle Earth orbit. Not middle of the Earth, but middle altitude above the Earth. Those orbits take hours, up to 10, 12, 14, 18 hours. Keep going. You can actually synchronize an orbit with the rotation of the Earth. Geologically synchronize it. At 23,000 miles up, 30,000 kilometers, one orbit takes 24 hours. Put a satellite there, it'll appear to hover above your location. That's geosynchronous. We have MEO, middle Earth orbit, and LEO, low Earth orbit. I was thinking about the flying car problem, and I realized we've actually solved that problem. What is the problem? You're sitting there in traffic. All the lanes are plugged. So a full 2 dimensions, you can't maneuver. And you say, gee, I wish I could just rise up and fly above them. So what you want to invoke is a 3rd dimension. We've already done that, at least in New York City. It's called the subway. What happens? You're in traffic, go into the 3rd dimension. It happens to be down, go into the 3rd dimension, and you bypass the traffic. That's basically a flying car. It's not flying, but it accomplishes the same dimensional solution to your traffic problem. Not only that, how come interstates don't stop at red lights? Because the crossroads go above or below in underpasses, invoking the 3rd dimension. If you could live forever, would you? Let me see your replies. Put it down here. For me, I don't think so. Knowing that I'm going to die compels me to get stuff done. When? Today. If I had an infinite number of tomorrows, which you'd have if you lived forever, you could just always do it tomorrow. And I worry about my productivity, my creativity, the focus and intensity with which I live my life. You could give plastic flowers to a loved one. They'd live forever. Why not? But you don't. You get real flowers. You know why? Because you both know they're going to die. And you have to appreciate them in the moments that they are alive. It brings focus and attention to that gift. So what I think of as the gift of life, knowing I'm going to die, brings focus and attention to being alive. Welcome to my office hours. Please explain daylight saving time. I can't. It kind of makes no sense. All right, here's what they're doing. When the days are longer anyway in the summer, days meaning how many hours of sunlight you have, when the days are already longer, they take an hour from the morning and put it at the end of the day so that the sun sets even later. And then the winter comes around, just when you need sunlight in the evening the most, because days are getting shorter, they take it away and put it back in the morning when everyone is still asleep. Makes no sense to me at all. In fact, some places like Arizona, forget it. All right, we got enough sun. We don't need more sun at any time later in the day than is already there. So I got nothing for you. What would convince me if we've been visited by intelligent aliens from another planet? The aliens? Okay. Not fuzzy lights in the sky, not eyewitness testimony. Give me the alien. I'm not going to stop you. You keep chasing them down. But if you want to convince me, if you care about convincing me, plus I don't know why you care, if you're really sure you have found aliens, you don't need me. Who cares what I think? All right? But if you want to convince me, bring on the alien. And that'll be good. In fact, that'll convince the world. And you'll be rich and famous overnight. And my point of view will be irrelevant. Just an obscure fact. The American flag, If it starts out as a white